We're live. Hey, everybody. My name's John Muir Laws, and welcome to the How to Draw Bird workshop with the Audubon Society. I want to give a real shout out to all the stewards of nature at the Audubon Society who are working for the continued conservation of birds. Really, really important. So as we are sheltering from COVID, we're now going to draw our corvids. And I think you're going to really enjoy today's class. Today, what I want to do is to show you what I think are the fundamental tricks to see a bird, get the basics of that bird down onto a piece of paper, and then to be able to drop in some of the details from memory and from being able to look at the bird. There's so much going on when you see a bird that if you are, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, like, okay, there's a little dark part there and you don't really understand the anatomy, it's hard to hold that stuff in your head when you then turn and you look down at your piece of paper. So I don't know if you've had this experience. You're looking at the bird. Okay, I want to draw this bird. You're looking at the bird, looking at the bird, looking at the bird. And you look down at your piece of paper and your mind is blank. You're like, it's a weird thing to go from the bird sitting to on your piece of paper. It turns out that understanding the anatomy, some basic anatomy of what's going on, what's where on the bird, what's happening underneath all those feathers, makes a big difference. So we are going to kind of do a deep dive into some anatomy that's relevant for bird artists, and also show you my techniques for seeing the bird and getting it down on paper. Now, if you've taken classes with me before or watched some of my YouTube videos about how to draw birds, my approach to doing this is constantly evolving. So let's say you have my book on how to draw birds. The book is still relevant. It's still accurate information. But the approach that I show in there of what is sort of my step-by-step kind of like what I think are the best first lines has actually changed since I've published that book. The rest of it is still relevant, but when I look at the bird, to capture that thing and get it down on my piece of paper with my first lines, that's changed. So you might be seeing some new approaches in this workshop. Also, if you already have done so and you have printed out, last night I put up online a worksheet that which you can use to help you with part of this workshop. We'll be kind of using this bird to kind of drop in some color later on. Not necessary to run to your printer right now if you haven't done this already. But if you go to my website, johnmuirlaws.com, to the description of this event in the calendar, you'll be able to see a download of where you can get this. The most interesting thing in it is going to be this little cutout of this bird. And what you'll be doing is we'll be cutting this out, and I'll be showing you some things with this. If you want to follow along just by watching the screen during this workshop, that's great. And you can print this out later. But we'll also have the link to this of where to get the little bird in the recording notes when we post this workshop online. So here we go. I'm going to switch over now away from the Jack Cam to a presentation view. We're going to be looking at some slides with some photographs of birds and some diagrams of anatomy, and I'm going to walk you through what I think is my new approach for blocking out the bird. You ready? Here we go. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to learn how to draw some birds. So let's just get started with this. Here's a bird, and what I'd like you to do is everybody's watching, pick up a pencil, get yourself a piece of paper, and we're all going to make a quick sketch of this bird. All right, you ready? On your mark, get set. And this is going to be, I'm going to give you roughly a minute to sketch this bird. Let's go. About 15 seconds left. This is actually being a very cooperative bird. Five seconds. You know how birds always give you those 5-second warnings before they take off. All right. So if you're new to this, you probably experience the, oh my gosh, I don't really know where to start. And what people tend to do is they start with drawing the eye and the beak, and then they work their way down from there. And if you do that, you can tend to get, you know, a drawing of part of the head to be something that is looking like what you're seeing. But then by the time you get down to the tail, very often the shape of the bird, the proportions of it are really kind of out of whack, because it's hard for our brains to keep in mind the overall shape of the bird and the details at the same time. So once you're in drawing details, your brain is really no longer really seeing the seeing those. Your brain is no longer able to track the big picture, the proportions of this bird. So what I'm going to suggest to you is an approach to, when you see the bird, to get down with a few lines the most essential things that you can, that are going to allow you then to, after the bird flies off, to be able to fill in from memory what you have, and to get down the basic form that we see. So we're going to take a look at blocking in this basic shape. And here are a few sketches of birds. You'll see that there's a very pale blue line behind them. You see that kind of scribbled blue line? That is my preliminary drawing. That is my first drawing. And on top of that, with the brown pencil here, I'm drawing in some details. But this drawing started with this light kind of ghosty brown, blue drawing. I usually start my drawings, this is, I have a favorite light blue pencil that I use for making these ghosty drawings. It's the Prismacolor Kohl Erase pencil, and it's their Prismacolor Kohl Erase Copy Not non-photo blue. They've changed the serial number on it. It is now the 20028, the 200 200 then 28. So this pencil is an incredibly light, ghosty pencil. And if you draw your preliminary sketch in with this pencil, then what you're going to find is that the other lines, when you drop them on top of it, people's eyes will snap right to those, and all the kind of scribbled light framing in lines, the skeleton that you've made, is going to essentially disappear. Otherwise, people will be able to see what you put in, and just your drawing will be on top of that. So this was my little preliminary sketch of the bird is taking a look at. If I were to draw on top of this, you might see some of those lines coming through. If you do it with this pencil, that's not really an issue. Let's kind of go through what I think are those most important lines. So the first thing that I'd look at is the shape along the back of the bird. So if you go down the head of the bird and along its back, right, that line. So sometimes when I'm out in the field and I'm looking through a telescope or my binoculars, if I'm looking through a telescope, you'll actually see me with, I'm looking through the scope here, I'm actually moving my hand through the air as if I'm patting the bird. And what I'm doing is I'm kinesthetically kind of getting a sense of what is the angle of that bird's body. So you start off, you pat the bird. What is that angle down its head and back? Sometimes it's a completely straight line down the back of the head and down the back. Sometimes there's a little kink where the head comes down and the back. That line is going to give you the bird's posture and also the position of the head relative to that body. So that first line, is it straight down the back? Is it at an angle like that? Is it an angle like that? That's line number one. And then what I do is I lightly, loosely put in a ball for the head. And so that's going to hang on top of that, or connect into that first line. Another very useful line is what I call the eye beak line. And this is going to give you a sense of action. My bird is looking in this direction. It turns out that on our songbirds, the eye and the beak line up with each other. So if you drew a line straight down the beak, the eye would sit on top of that line. So with this one line, you get a lot of information. And that means my bird is looking up, my bird is looking down, my bird is looking whichever way your bird happens to be looking. Right? The next thing I do is I pat the bird's tummy, right? So what are the angles from kind of underneath the head, kind of beginning to come into the chest? Those angles, how the head sits into the body, is really going to change the look of your bird. So at the start, we're getting what's the angle on the back, we're putting in the head, then what's the angle right where the head meets the belly. We get those elements in, that head is going to fit into the body. This ends up being a really critical part of making the profile, the posture of this bird look like the bird that you're seeing. Now, I'm going to pop in the body. So for my body, it's a light, loose oval, right? That's going to fit between that back and that belly. This is where I'm looking at the proportions of the bird. How big is that head relative to the body? So a chickadee or something like that has a huge head. A robin or a dove, proportionate to its body, it's got a tiny little pinhead. Right? So different birds have different proportions, different body sizes. This is the place in the drawing where I'm getting those in. Then I'm putting in a line for the direction that the tail is, and different birds can cock their tails up at different angles, or they'll flick it down. And the leading edge of the wing, so the front edge of the wing, I'll get those two in just with a line. So here's where the front edge of my wing is, here's where my tail sticks out. From there, I'll often pop in where on that body the leg comes in. So I sometimes think of the body like a clock, and what o'clock on that circle, on that oval, right? Here it's really coming in at the bottom of that, but I pay attention to where that leg inserts, and also where that leg is relative to the mass of the body. You notice that my foot is going to be here. If I trace up from that, you notice I'm really going through the core weight area of the body. So all this weight here comes down on top of that spot. So to make your bird balanced, you want the weight of it above its foot. If its foot is back here, the bird is going to feel like it's tipping forward. If the foot is over here, the bird's going to feel like it's coming back. So somewhere right in here is that balance point of the bird. There's not very much weight at all in the tail. So ignore that in terms of kind of thinking of what is the the weight of this bird. If my bird is turned at a slight angle, and I see some of the back or some of the face, getting some other kind of reference lines is useful. So if the bird is turned towards me slightly, I'll often put a line right down the middle of my face oval. Or if I'm looking at the back and I can see its back so that I'm seeing both wingtips, or instead of the side of the tail, kind of the edge of the tail, I will put in these sets of parallel guides that, so this might be the base of the tail, this might be where the wingtips are, and I want them to be parallel with the base of the tail. Parallel with that is the end of the secondary feathers, parallel with that is the top of the wings. So here on the back, I've got just a little set of parallel guides. And there is that center line in the face. Those are really my essential lines. This happens very, very fast in a drawing. On top of this, I then put down, step away from the blue pencil. Doing very lightly with your graphite pencil. So not all blue pencils draw lightly, just sort of get your kind of ghostiest, worst pencil, like really good quality color pencils. They will put a lot of color down on your page. You don't want one of those quality ones. You want one of your cheap colored pencils that you can't really make good marks with. Right. So this is just saying that that center line down the middle of the face of your bird is going to be really helpful if the head is turned towards you slightly. So when I'm putting in that, I'm thinking I am seeing the middle of my face. It's not going to be straight towards me. It's going to be a crescent over to the side. If I am doing a 3/4 view bird face, I will draw in a little box where my beak is going to attach. So, and that is going to be centered right on top of the crosshairs of that eye beak line and the and that center line. So that's where my beak is going to come out with. And you notice I've drawn a little dot out at the tip. That is where my that's where the tip of my beak will be. If I've got this, I have the raw materials to be able to draw in my details on top of this. And if I've done it with a really pale pencil, then those lines are not distracting. I know this is a big jump. We're going to get there. We're going to get into all of this detail. But what I want you to see is the degree to which this bird is drawn on top of a scaffolding that, that you can use and that you can make. So that you can see this little, here's the end of the tail, here's the wingtips, here's the mass of the body, here's the mass of the head, that angle, right? The beak started in here, it went out to there. There's that eye sitting on top of that line. So all those features, I can, when I'm in there drawing that eye, I'm not having to think, where does the eye go on top of this head? I'm able to put it in on top of a framework that makes sense. I'm going to stop this screen share for a minute and just jump over to a document camera for a moment. And because what I want to do is to show you kind of the speed with which these lines work. All right, so what we're not doing is this. We're not going, your back of your head comes down like this and over like this with these deliberate, slow lines. When you're making this kind of a sketch, this is essentially what it looks like. You're going to be going, all right, you've got kind of your back is like that. No, it's about more like that. There you go. Okay, and your head is here, and you're looking up. All right, now here is your tummy. Your tummy's going to come down, out, back, down, out, back. Sometimes I'll even talk out loud to my bird. Down, out, back. All right, you've got a body in there and a little tail. Your wingtip is drooped down. You've got a drooping wingtip. It's not up like that. You've got a wingtip drooping down. All right, and you have a foot that's coming down. There's a little space like this. There's a shape between those two legs. You've got one foot hanging onto a branch, another one here, and that is my there's my basic bird shape. So you see that it's light, loose, it's fast, it's not careful and precise. If you make one deliberate line, your brain locks onto that and says that line must be right. But if instead I'm kind of going like that, then I've got some wiggle room to see all those different lines and for my brain to go like, oh, I like that one the best. All right, so that's what I'm going to stick with. So you don't have to kind of go like, here is the back of my bird. Once you do that, your brain will lock on that and you're not going to be willing to, your brain's not going to let you be able to change your mind, as you're going. So,
hey John, we might be getting some comments that your camera might be out of focus.
Camera out of focus. Let's go back to that camera view. I think it's probably more likely that I have a broad tipped pencil, and so it's making a fairly broad, blurry line. Or we can refocus that.
Or, actually, I think the video is fine. A lot of folks are saying that it's looking good to them.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, so I'm intentionally going with a fairly, if you look at my pencil tip, can you see my pencil tip online? On my pencil tip here, it's a pretty dull pencil tip. That also helps me kind of draw with sort of less precise at the start here. I want a soft, dull pencil instead of something that's going to give me a hard edge. Sometimes a dull pencil is easier to block your shape in. So what we're going to do is we are going to all get to play with this a little bit. So here's a bird, and what we're going to do is we're going to do some speed sketches of this bird. So I'm going to give everybody here 1 minute to block in this bird. Ready? Let's go. Let's take 1 minute, and we are going to set a little timer here for myself. "20 seconds left. New bird. All right, start with just the line on the back. Drop the head into it. What you're going to find is some of these sketches you kind of look like, yeah, I can kind of see the oomph of the bird in that. And some of them won't, but you've just spent 1 minute on it. And so what I find is that if I do this 1 minute sketch and it really kind of captures the gestalt of the bird, I will use that for my drawing. If it doesn't, just give it a new minute on a new bird. Let's try this one. Make this one smaller or larger than the previous drawings that you did. So you're going to now work at a different size, a different scale. Keep it loose. Draw faster than that. Yeah, I'm watching you. Keep it loose. And one more. Just as an experiment, try drawing really, just get your hand moving faster on this drawing. All right. Light, so when you draw slowly, your brain wants to be precise. When you're just scribbling around there, your brain will let you, that really drooped wing there. And there we go. All right, now, this exercise that we just did is really, really valuable to do. When you want to draw birds, get yourself to, let's see, where are, there we are in Zoom. So here are some of my sketches. They're fast, they're loose. I'm not dropping in detail, but you can sort of get the sense of that bird from those sketches. On top of this is where you make what people really think of as the drawing, but this underdrawing that gets the gestalt of the bird, the feeling of the bird, is really important. And if your if your kind of gestalt sketch doesn't have the feeling of that bird, when you get in there and add all the details on top of it, it still won't. It still won't. And so you want to this to start to kind of look back at you as the feeling of the bird. One thing to pay attention to as you're doing that is the proportions of the bird. So when I am talking proportions, the simplest and most easy to remember way to think about this is you're thinking about how big is the head relative to the body. And the general rule is big bird, small head. Small bird, big head. So the smaller the bird, the larger the head, and consequently, the cuter it will look. So here are two birds with, this one has some thrush proportions in it. This one here, the details, if you notice, the details are exactly the same in both these pictures. Same wings, same tail, same feet, just really different proportions. This one up here, my proportions are off. It doesn't matter what details I put into this drawing, it's not going to look like a thrush. No matter how I color this, it's not going to look like a thrush. And so those proportions end up being really important for us to pay attention to, particularly how big is the head relative to the body. Secondarily, how long is the beak relative to the head? How long is the tail? And the last little thing which you can, for advanced people, to include in their proportions is on the wing. We'll be learning about wings in a moment. This is the secondary feathers, this is the primary feathers. The last little thing for people who are more advanced birders, they're looking at how big are the primary feathers compared to the secondary feathers. How far do the primary feathers extend out past the tip of the secondaries here? So that's what's called, we call that the primary projection. So when we're drawing proportions, let's just try this. Before you start drawing, just close one eye and with the tip of your pencil, look at the screen and draw a little circle around the head of the bird and around the chunk of the body of the bird, the mass of the body of the bird. Get those proportions kinesthetically into your hand, then turn down to your piece of paper, draw that line along the back, drop in a circle for that head and a little line along the chest and a circle for that body with those proportions. Here you're really paying attention to getting that head size to be right compared to that body. Not worried about the rest of those lines. Now, try it with this. All right, that line along the back. All right, and drop in a head, big ol' head on this. All right, great big head. And then putting in that line on the front, you're sort of making a little cup there that the ball of the body can sit into. Can you get something where you have the head? I made my head too small. Huh. Then check back with your proportions. How well did you capture that? At this point, you can make your head bigger. You can make your head bigger, and it's easy to do just by kind of poofing that line out. There's no details on there. Once you put details in, you're locked into your proportions. But at this point in a drawing, you can just go like, oh, look, my head's too small. Huh, fancy that. Think I'll make it bigger. So change your proportions if you need to. Go back and look at this one. Do you need to change your proportions? Sometimes if you look down at your drawing to double check if you got it right, your brain will say, oh, yes, you did. Congratulations, here's a cookie. But I will sometimes look at it with the question of like, did I make my head too big? I tend to make my heads too big. So I will ask it, I'll say, did I make my head too big? Is that head too big? And when going with a really specific question like that, kind of my brain goes like, you really want to know, don't you? Okay, yeah, you did. You can change it now. And it gives you a chance to kind of catch those things. So a little Jedi mind trick you can play with yourself. If you say, did I get it right? Your brain will often serve you up the comfortable answer of yes, right? If I ask my proportions, did I make your head too big or too small? I will often be able to see what I need to change. So the head position can also change. Inside that little cute bird body, there is a long and flexible neck. And in the little bird here, its neck, its spine, its skull ends here, and its neck wraps around like a big S in here. It's got a big S fold in it and is extended here. You see the same thing going on here. Same species, same species. But notice when this head is down, the chest is a little bit more poofy up here, right? When the head is down, slimmer as it goes here because all that neck is folded up in there. Wow. So also when I'm blocking my proportions, I'm looking at where is this head relative to the body? And that's where the little cutout bird friend comes in. And if you already have this printed out, you're great. If not, we'll send you links so you can get this later on. I've got a little bird right here, right? There's my bird. Now this head can extend up really far. The head can move around. It can go down here and peck at things. So it's got this very flexible head, and the head can tuck down into the feathers. Now look at this. Look at this angle here, right along the back. I'm putting my pencil along the back edge of the bird, And what we're getting is a line straight down here. Sometimes when you look at the back of the head, there's no kink here. It's just straight down like that. All right? The more that it lifts its head up, the more you start to see this angle right here. Right? You see the angle made by this and this. Right? So that angle here that's often what I'm capturing in that first line when I'm starting my sketch. So, and again, that can be, if it tucks its head down, here we go. All right. That also can be just a straight slope all the way down the back of the bird. So really, you capture so much, the head position, the posture of the bird, when you're putting in that first line with your sketch. That's why I make that line my first one, because it gives me just a ton of information. But playing around with this little bird is going to help you think about how to place that head. Now, let's think about the weight of this. If the head of the bird is sticking out far like this, this is going to take muscles. It's going to take muscles and fatigue muscles that are holding this head up. This takes work. If you don't want to do the work of having your head stick out, then take your head and place it up on top of the mass of your body. To see how in this position, the weight of the head drops down into the body. So this would be, bird at rest here. This is an active working bird. But when it comes back to rest, it's going to have its head here, where the weight of that head drops down into the body. So I sometimes think of a wall in front of the chest of the body. And when the bird's head is behind the wall, it can use just the structure of its body to hold its head up, so no work required. So that's going to be your go-to position for your head, right? Behind the wall. When you are actively feeding and pecking stuff there, the head will come out in front of the wall. The pencil is the wall, right? But generally, what you're going to be seeing is that your birds, if this is my, we'll do this for a bird with a slope back and bird with an angle back, right? So if here's my bird's head, the ball of the body is going to be below that, all right? Now, if the head is up, the ball of the body, it's not going to be back here. That's a working bird. That's a lot of effort to get your neck out there. The body is in here. That's why that I now have people kind of tuck that front line. It helps if you get that line, you'll then nestle your body ball up into the right place into your bird. So that's why we kind of cup this ball with this line and this line. Right. So notice that this head is, the weight of it is coming down into the body. Weight generally coming down into the body. So here, you see those two balls, one stacked on top of the other. That same bird starts to peck around and is active. Now, it is, that head can stick out there, but when it comes back to rest, it's going to be doing this. So hanging out, pecking at stuff. And most of the time it's going to be in this position. But when you're drawing a bird out like this, it is probably going to be an active bird in the middle of some action. Now, we're going to turn our attention to getting in. You've got your basic sketch down on paper, and you want to begin to really draw to put down your light blue pencil or to start to draw more heavily. This is where we kind of get into some of the nitty-gritty details of, like, how do you draw the beak and the eye? We're going to go there, and we're going to spend particular attention looking at the bird's head and the bird's wing in this workshop. So here are a couple of birds. So a smaller one with a bigger head and a bigger one with a smaller head. We've been talking about those proportions. And we have also one here with a slope back, where it's one line all the way down the back of the head, the little wren on the left. And you notice how the head sticks up on that scrub jay. So on the scrub jay, I've got a sticking up head. These drawings are done on top of this little blue framework. And you can get in there and deliberately sketch these things in once you have a solid framework. But neither of these drawings would have worked. Doesn't matter how you're handling your foot if your proportions and that basic shape is off. That's why those first exercises are so critical. Let's just walk through those one more time. I'm going to suggest that I'm going to draw two birds. It'll be a warbler at the top and a sparrow on the bottom. Warbler with a head up, sparrow with a flat back. And as I'm going along blocking these in, I'm going to suggest that you follow along at home drawing one of these. We also will record this workshop if you want to come back later and revisit drawing the other. So choose your warbler at the top or the sparrow at the bottom and put in your first line. We're going to take this one from all the way into kind of getting details on it. We're then going to block in our head on our bird. Give it an eye beak line. And then a little belly line. All right. So that gives you kind of the catcher's mitt that the body ball is going to fit into. So there is your little scoop of you've made that scoop in the body. The body fits into that scoop. Notice especially on that sparrow at the bottom, how my body circle and my head circle overlap each other. The reason that I can get away with overlapping those is what you're seeing as the body circle is a little tiny body inside a big mass of fluffy feathers. And and the same with the head. There's a lot of that ball is fluff. So those two circles can overlap without you having to worry about, I just have my head sticking into my skeleton. That doesn't make sense. That can't work. Then I'm going to put in my wings and my tail. In these sketches, I'm doing actually a little bit more with the wing. You'll see me on the wings sometimes kind of blocking in where the secondary feathers stop. This is sort of for advanced birders. So secondary feathers, here's the end of the primary feathers. I'll then be sculpting that into my wing shape. So sometimes very early on in a sketch, I'll just sort of block in. Well, here's where the bottom of my secondaries go. And here's a little bit of undertail coverts. Another useful angle is just the angle on the forehead. So when the beak comes in, and fits into the head of the bird, what is that angle right there? On some birds, it'll be a real smooth slope. On others, you'll see a real pop up in an angle there. So that angle can be very helpful. Another angle that's useful is where the undertail coverts come into the body. You often will see an angle in there. Helps you kind of carve that initial shape. Where do the legs come out? So thinking of that body as a clock. And where do those legs come out on the underside of that body? I initially put in just a placeholder as a little ball for my feet. Now, you can start to draw in details. And this is where the fun part, the part which we often really just sort of think of more as the drawing itself, comes in. Something that I'll often do when I'm drawing a bird beak is I won't make the suture in the middle of the mouth go all the way to the tip of the beak. Instead, what I do is I stop that before it gets all the way out there. Sometimes it's hard to see that little point there. Now the eye is going to be placed on that eye line, not in the middle of the head, a little bit closer to the front than you think it should be. So it'll be closer to the front than the back.
Hey, John, some
Yeah.
feedback that we're getting is that people would like to see the drawing. So if you could stop screen sharing, it'll zoom in on your drawing.
Okay. So does my drawing and the screen share show up simultaneously on your view?
It does, but the photos are the ones that take up most of the screen. So that's just the way that the screen share works. So if you click stop sharing screen,
when they I don't know if you're doing it with a split screen. Sometimes you can move a little slider bar to make one of those images larger. I don't know if it's working that way with yours right now. So this is currently what I'm looking at with my bird. So I'm not taking that beak all the way out to the tip there. There. So from here, I can start to wrap feathers around the edges of these birds, and I will often sort of start by just kind of connecting my head into my body. Look for angles in the heads. Sometimes there are little micro crests and things that that you can get. And do you see the little tick marks I have right here and here? Just a few of those sort of if I do this as a solid edge, it looks like the bird is made out of plastic. But in a couple of places, if you just make a few little tick marks across that, it starts to feel fluffy. And especially where you kind of come over a bump like the top of the head, you'll often see some just a few little tick marks in there go a long way to making it start to feel fluffy. And I'll do the same around the body here. Where you, especially at the back edge of the body, All right, so the belly comes around here. It's going to connect into the undertail coverts down in here. Put a few little suggestions of fluffiness into that. And you can get that by these little tick marks flicking back in this way. See the same thing here. So the belly feathers are small in here, getting larger, and towards the back, they're more shaggy. So you can get on your line, smooth line, more shag, smooth to shag. So on the belly of the bird here, if I have something that is a smooth line, then, and that feels too plastic to me, I'll just put a few little flick marks through it. Try to, as you're putting in those little tick marks and flicks, try to avoid avoid having those be evenly spaced. Let me stop this share, escape, and come back to this view here. So if I'm drawing the back edge of a bird like this and I put in tick marks like this, they feel like minutes on a clock. There it is. I don't want that. So I want some bigger, some smaller, and different spacing on those. And a few of those little marks, like I did in here, it just sort of feels like, oh, there's some rougher, more rough feathers that are down in that area. So then I block in my wing. We're going to get into more wing structure, but there's a block of the wing, a little step in the wing, and then the wing edge comes up. The top edge of the wing can often be hidden in some belly feathers, and this edge of the wing is going to be the top. So here's some belly feathers, and the top edge here, there's back feathers that will come down into that. In a moment, we'll get into other features of the wing, sort of how to understand the different tracks of feathers. There are some zones of smaller feathers towards the top of the wings, and we'll get into what those are. For now, just you can think of kind of there's a curved zone of small feathers towards the top. There's an extra little pad of feathers in here. We'll kind of get into that in just a moment. But before I go further with this bird body here, I want to drop in a little bit more detail on the head of the bird. And the reason is that really getting a good solid head helps your bird look back at you. Right now, it kind of has this little Orphan Annie look with this round eye and in the middle of a big blank head. But if I put details and structure around that eye, that bird's eye will fit into the head much more effectively. So what I'm going to do is just show you on this 3/4 view here. I'm going to draw another little bird head here with its, see there's where the base of the beak attaches, the little cone that sticks out, and that is, there's my little bird beak, not taking this all the way out to the tip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few features onto the head of this bird here, and at the same time drop them in on these birds here. But this larger one, you can kind of, I'll be able to see and point out some of these critical features. There's some structures on the head of a bird that I regularly put in. So the first is there is a ring of feathers that goes around the eye. And I will draw that in as kind of like sleepy marks on these birds. Notice that I didn't draw it in as a full circle tight around that eye. A little bit of suggestion of it above, a little bit of suggestion of it below. That's the orbital feathers, the orbital feathers. Another key piece is just as there's a zone of small feathers that go around the eye, there's also a patch that goes back from the edge of the eye, then down across the side of the head and up to the mouth. That is the bird's ear patch, or auricular feathers. So I'll often have a suggestion of that ear patch. Just sometimes it's very clear, sometimes it's subtle. Below the ear patch, there is also a zone of feathers that comes down diagonally on the side of the face called the malar. And it goes from the base corner of the bill down, so from the corner of the mouth to the base of the bill, a line kind of paralleling the edge of this ear patch. So you'll see that just a little hint of it in here, a little hint of it in here. That is, you're going to find in a moment that that's a very useful thing for giving you some structure on the head of your bird. The last is, I'm going to connect the eyes to the beak, and this can give your bird kind of an Angry Birds sort of a look. But getting this little connection here between eye and beak, that little area in there, I've recently found in my illustrations of birds that paying attention just between that eye-beak connection right here ends up being this really productive zone. A little bit more attention right in that place makes a big difference. So here I put in a few, just sort of the base of the head here, covering around like this. A little suggestion of other feathers in here. So base of the head, you often have a change in the feathers here. There's also on the back of the bird, there's this patch of feathers on its back, and above the wing there's a second pile. So on this bird where you can see each feather very clearly, you can clearly see that there's a zone of feathers here on the back different than this, and that is different than this part on the back of the head. So if I go back here, I have my back of my head zone, right, base of the head here, and I will sometimes show just a little bit of an indication of a difference between on the back of the bird. Here's the back. This is what's called the scapular feathers above the wing. Back and scapular feathers. So if I put that on my little bird friend, so legs come forward. And I've done whole workshops just on drawing bird feet. All of my workshops are free online if you go to johnmuirlaws.com.
John, could you move the photo a little bit more into frame?
Is that in frame? Oh, almost. There we go. I'm going to show now a little bit more detail on the heads of on the head of this bird. And actually, first I'm going to, yeah, let's do that. I'm going to stop this share, just kind of come over here. So what I've been doing as this has been going along is drawing in these zones with my kind of a thick tipped pen here. But you can see I'm putting in these indications of the edges of those zones. And you're going to find that on bird heads, you will find features popping out on the heads of those birds that will follow those same tracks. We have a half hour left, and in that time, what I wanted to do is what I would like to do is to show, instead of actually spending more time on the head right now, is to take a look at the wings and give people a few more resources and ideas about how to handle those. If you, let's share that screen again. Right. So when you look at bird wings, what you're going to see is there are several discrete different zones. Don't get overwhelmed here. There's a lot of feathers going on, but what we have is this tip of the wing here, and those are the long flight feathers, and they fan out like this. There's a second zone in closer to the body that come out more parallel with each other. See, these are a fan, these are coming out parallel. So these are called primary feathers, these are the secondary feathers. And over the top, both of those are these zones of smaller feathers that cover up the front edge of the wing. So you see a big row blue, medium green, bunch of small feathers here in red. There's this pile of feathers up at the top of the wing. So we have primaries, secondaries, and then these smaller feathers up here. These are called covert feathers. These are coverts on the primaries, coverts on the secondaries here. This little triangle of feathers here is actually attached to the bird's thumb. It's called the alula. That's a separate little piece in there. But you can just sort of notice that there's, on the primaries, there's primaries, primary coverts, alula, and on the secondaries, there's secondaries, then a big row, a medium row, and small rows. These all get attached to the bird's arm. Birds, just like you, have a shoulder, and right here, an elbow, and a wrist. Their hand bones are all fused together. That's a hummingbird right up there. That's a sparrow. This would be an albatross. Between all those birds, you see that same basic arrangement. The flight feathers attach to the hand and the forearm, not the upper arm. And so here's that fan of feathers, the primary feathers that comes down, and then there's a sheet of secondary feathers that comes down. And let's also notice that the last couple of secondaries get shorter. So at the end you see 1, 2, 3. These things stepping up smaller. Here's all my secondaries, primaries, secondaries. Kind of a fun note about this is that as you open one joint in the wings, if you open this joint here, the elbow, it actually automatically opens up this part here. It's what's technically called an automatic linkage system. So birds will tend to have their wing either tucked or extended or part way, but usually not with the back part tucked and the upper part out. They're all kind of connected through the system. So the outer part is just operated by ligaments from down below. Pretty cool little system. But if you look at that in sort of more kind of diagram form, here are those primaries, here are the coverts on the primaries, and here's that alula. So on the primaries, 1, 2, 3 steps going up, big, medium, small. And on the secondaries, you have big, medium, small, and then a bunch of just fluffy small feathers that are up above that. Boom, 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 boom. Let's also notice that these last 3 secondaries, chump, 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 they sometimes have bright tips on them. They're often different colors, and they sort of step down. So for secondaries, think 1, 2, 3, and a whole pile the same length. 1, 2, 3, whole pile the same length. As the wing folds, the primary feathers are going to end up tucking in underneath the secondaries. So notice that secondary sort of arrangement, stripes on these covert feathers here. So follow the covert feathers. They still make these clear bands across the wing. The secondaries are coming into a nice, neat, compact pile. The primaries make a big strip sticking out underneath them. A triangle sticking out underneath this rectangle. Let's take a look at this bird. Can you spot any of these? First, look at the primaries and look along the front edge. Look along the front edge of the wing. So see if you can follow up the primaries, find the primary coverts, and then find the alula. They're all dark. You see that? Primaries, primary coverts, and what's that? Now, let's take a look at the secondaries. On the back, see if you can see that 1, 2, 3 whole pile the same length zone. 1, 2, 3 whole pile the same length. 1, 2, 3 whole pile the same length. Those are the secondary feathers. So secondary feathers, and here's the start of the primary feathers getting longer. Secondaries, the secondary coverts overlap all the way to here. Here's the biggest row with white tips, medium row, getting covered up by scapular feathers here. You can see a little bit of the top parts up there. They're getting covered up by some of these shoulder feathers. The green feathers here are just flopping in over from over the shoulder. That's the scapular. So 1, 2, 3, whole pile the same length. The proportions of the primary feathers and the secondary feathers can be different on different birds. Long narrow-winged birds, like swallows and hummingbirds, have very short secondaries and very long primaries. Look at that, that's all primaries. So in here, primaries, primary coverts, alula. Secondaries, secondary coverts. And here's the first row of secondary coverts. And then up here, you have the rest of the secondary coverts, but they're blue. And you see there's the first row of them there, and a bunch of smaller ones on top of that. So secondary coverts are coming down small, 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 smalls to the medium, to the big ones. But even in the big ones, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, whole pile the same length. And primaries coming down from that. This one has very short primaries. Here's where your primaries are sticking out. Here are your 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So your secondaries are in here, secondary coverts coming in here, and we're losing the rest of the secondary coverts. Are getting all covered up by the shoulder feathers here, the scapulars. 1, 2, 3. So what I want to be able to do is to look at a bird wing and to make some sense out of it. Here in my nice little diagram, it's easier to see this, but let's just review this one more time. Figure out where the primaries are on this bird. primary coverts, pick them out on the screen. And the alula, pick it out on the screen. Can you see the 1, 2, 3 whole pile the same length? Those are the secondaries. Oh, let's first pause with a real bird. So take a look on this one. Find the primaries, the primary coverts, and the alula. Just right up the front edge of that wing. Primaries, primary coverts, alula. The alula ends up often in line with that first row of secondary coverts, right? So it just looks like it's one more secondary covert that didn't get the message about being the same color as everybody else. So then where are the secondary coverts? It's that zone up there. So try it on this. Find the primaries, follow them all the way up to the primary coverts and the alula. Now in this, it's kind of cool. The primary feathers are two-toned. They're all brown at the base, and they have orange margination on the upper parts of them. So that orange that you see in the wing of that bird, that's actually part of the primaries, just sort of a wider part of the web of that feather that has some color on it, a margination. Find the 1, 2, 3 whole pile the same length for the secondaries and follow those up to the secondary coverts. Large pile, medium pile, then getting smaller. So at the start, it really helps to look at carefully, map out, and diagram bird wings. Make careful drawings of these. Sort of, can you find a good photograph of a bird, map in those feathers, and just sort of do it as a study. Crazy on this. So here's my challenge for you. I'm going to kind of bounce around. What are these green feathers in the middle of the wing here? Right. If you're at home, make a decision, make a call on it. If you're with other people, tell them what you're thinking. Right. These are the first row of the covert feathers, the secondary covert feathers, the big ones. The next row, you see it purple kind of sneaking in here. These are scapular feathers in green above them. Find the alula. Find the alula. And alulas sometimes look like secondary covert feathers that didn't get the memo about the color change.
Hey, John, a lot of people are curious about the species of this bird.
Oh, this is a painted bunting, right? And it actually isn't, somebody didn't get in there and paint it. They really come this way. This is what nature does when it's feeling frisky. Isn't that gorgeous? Find the secondaries, 1, 2, 3, whole pile the same length. And on the primaries, you can see a little bit of that emargination, which we talked about before. It looks like there's a set of feathers terminating here. That's actually just the edge of this feather that has a big, broader mark on it, and then it gets skinnier coming down here. This primary comes down, and it doesn't end here. Its emargination ends there, and it gets skinnier coming out that way. Right, so that's primaries coming down there. So if you can look at a diagram like this, that really helps you be able to, or a diagram like this, and map it out and see that on a photograph. That's really helpful. The secondary coverts will often have a pale upper edge, lower edge. So if there's a white spot in the bottom edge of it, that makes a wing bar across the bird. So when you see wing bars, think secondary coverts. When you see wing bars, think secondary coverts. Also, these 1, 2, 3 in the whole pile the same length, they will often have either bright colored tips or bold edges on them. So on the wing, these are places where you'll see interesting patterns. Wing bars and these tertials. Sorry, I'm just using a new term. This 1, 2, 3, they're sometimes called tertials, right? But they're just the first 1, 2, 3 secondaries. So you can, if you want to call them by their own term, you may, or just sort of 1, 2, 3, whole pile the same length. Find those on this bird. See those nice wing bars? So now you know when you see wing bar, automatically think secondary feathers, secondary coverts. Wing bars are secondary coverts. You see how the bar is made by these overlapping edges of, see, it's not white over here, it's white over here. And that one here overlaps that one, that overlaps that one, overlaps that one. And it gives you this white bar across the wing. Tertials with those pale edges. All right. So if you're going to draw this, diagramming it in at the start as a study, a great exercise. But very often when I'm sketching out in the field, I don't do that. Oh, actually, this I first wanted to mention that. Sometimes part of your wing gets covered depending on how chilly your bird is. So if your bird is cold, they go over and they will cover up that front edge of the wing. The back edge can get covered up by scapular feathers, the front edge by the breast feathers. So as this bird gets colder, then these feathers will fluff up more and cover up more of the wing. These ones will fluff up more and cover up the wing. So very cold bird, the wing is just hiding under all those scapular feathers and breast feathers. But let's think about simplifying the wing then, because as an exercise, it's great to understand all those feathers. But if you draw them in on every drawing, it'll look like you put this sort of scaly lizard part on the side of your bird. And sometimes it's really not going to look natural. So you'll have a loosely handled bird, and then you'll have this wing that it's all feather, 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 kind of like a diagram. So sometimes when I'm sketching birds, what I'll do is I'll just use this shape. Here's the top edge hidden, front hidden, and it is just coming down as a shape. If I want to get a little bit fancier, or if it has wing bars, I will sometimes cover that up, and I will sometimes just indicate those by a couple of curved lines across the wing. This is a really legitimate way to handle a wing, and it shows a lot of understanding. But again, it helps to first understand what is happening with that wing before you kind of get in there and draw in all those little details. Sometimes I will also put in a hint of the tertials. So let's say if something like this is a blue grosbeak and it has bold wing bars here, and then an orange part up here, and bright edges on the tertials. I might put just an indication of that there are some tertials. That's as if I'm just sort of leaving this as a pencil line sketch. There's my wing on the side. A little bit of a hint of some scapular feathers up there. That helps that wing sit into the back. Otherwise, this sort of feels like just a big blank zone. But I know that there's some scapular feathers up in here. Just put in a little bit of a bump. Sometimes it makes it, there's a bump of the back, bump of the scapulars. So very often when I'm drawing wings, I'm not drawing in all those feathers. But any marks that I put on the wing are driven by an understanding of structurally what is there. The wings can also droop, so they can be tucked up on the back, They can droop down. See, there's the other wingtip, deep, deep, sticking down there. So the wings can be down. So you just have to, remember at the start when we kind of drew in that line on the lower edge of the wing, that's where I'm looking at, is this a drooper? Is this up like that? Some birds, like robins when they're running around on their lawn, or blackbirds, will traditionally droop their wings. Other times they'll have them tucked neatly up on their back. So just sort of see what your bird does. This one, now very high, tucked up on the back. So understanding this, yes, but now you see just, it kind of almost looks jarring that there's this diagram of all the wing detail. Oh, wow, I can make my pointer big. There's this, all this information in here. This is handled, this bird is handled kind of loosely out here, and then this part, right, really getting anal and dropping in every feather. You don't have to do this, and it will look funky on your drawings if you do it. But I do recommend that you study it so that you can do this, and then you're choosing, you get to choose which information you put in and which you leave out. All right? So let's take this and add and color in that bird. If you printed out the bird worksheet to get the little bird model, there is a bunting drawing on there, and I'm going to be painting on top of that, and so you can follow along if you wish. If you don't have that, then don't worry about that. You can print that out later, and I really do recommend it as an exercise for. I find it actually really nice to be able to paint on top of somebody else's drawing, where you don't have to worry about kind of messing up your own drawing. That way, you get more of a chance to play with the watercolors without the pressure of, oh, I don't want to mess up this one drawing that I did. The first thing I do when I am using watercolors, and I'll do demos with other media in other workshops, so I'm just going to do a little watercolor demo here, is I start with the shadows on the bird. I imagine if this bird were an albino, no pigment at all, where would I see color? And here's my bird. I imagine that there are shadows underneath the front edge of its wing. All right, there's some, it can be down here on its belly. Right. The light's coming from the back, so there'll be some here under its throat. And I can put in just a hint of where I want those shadows to be. Here, I like putting in my shadows first, because then I can paint on top of that and not worry about messing up other details and things that I have already put in on my feather. So on my bird. If you put in the shadows at the end as sort of an afterthought, it's not as, it can really mess things up for you, because you will smear and mess up paint that you already laid down. And once that's dry, I can just put layers of other paint on top of that. So this bird's body is going to be all blue. And so I can come along and paint my bird blue. And if I don't think it's bright enough blue, then I can, with watercolor, what you do is you just add another coat. but it helps to wait till that first coat is dry, and then you can just come along and paint on top of what you've put down before. If the paint that you put down before is still wet, you can run into problems with stuff puddling up, stuff smearing, and you won't like the effects that you are getting as much. But once your paint is dry, with watercolor, you can very easily come in and put another coat. A lot of people don't like watercolor because they've had the experience of putting paint down on paint that is already wet and having the whole thing just get really smeary and blurry. If that's been your experience, try just sort of painting without those sort of big puddles of paint. Instead, let the paint dry between coats, and you are going to have better results. Right? If you are working out in the field, you can what you do is you can let your thing dry in the sun. If you're working from home, you can use a hair dryer, and that really speeds up your drying time. I'll let more of this dry later because you all don't want to watch paint dry. Next thing I'm going to do on my bird here is to add in some of the lighter colored details on its wings. So on the edges of its tertials, the 1, 2, 3, I'm going to put in some color, and all along the edges of these covert feathers. I'm going to put black or a dark value color, mixing some dark brown, a little bit of dark blue, some black into my wings. And as I'm drawing these, I'm thinking of the individual feathers that are under here. So when I'm in the primary area here, I'm thinking about how the edges of these primary feathers, they come straight up in this way. If any sort of streaking shows up in my final drawing, it'll be kind of in the right direction and can actually help give the effect of feathers. So I'm helping this 1, 2, 3 look cool by putting black in this back edge of it and bring that all the way up to the coverts. And that gives me this effect of light pale edges on these tertials. The brush that I'm using is a water brush. It holds inside its barrel is water that, and I can use that to, when I change colors, I just give it a squeeze and a wipe on here. I find this really useful for painting and drawing in the field. And now I just use the same brush for all of my studio work. A little bit of gray in the beak. And dark eye. On the eye here, I'm going to leave a little bit of white in it to be a highlight from the sun. And then notice this big jump here, right? This is okay, then like, ooh, something really cool happened. What I do is I've let the drawing dry, and then I have put in with some white colored pencil, so a little bit of feathery texture in here. And a little bit goes a long way on that. A little bit of feathery texture in here. Here's some blue edges in here. You can see the blue pencil coming in here, the white pencil coming in here. Oh, that goes a long way to, so here it is without, just that white colored pencil. Last thing, a little bit of blotchiness here in the back. I'll put in details like this at the end of the drawing. I put it in at the end of the drawing, and that means that otherwise it would just get smeared. If I put that in earlier, it would get smeared by moving all that other paint around. So there is kind of walking through a layer of watercolor on top of a drawing that you've blocked in. We've talked about the structure of the head. We've talked about the structure in the wing. And here dropped some watercolor in on top of our sketch. The best way to get a handle on this is to make some drawings of birds just from photographs. And I'm going to suggest 2 websites where you can go and get wonderful photographs of birds that the photographers really encourage artists to come there and use those. They're professional grade bird photographs. And these photographers encourage people to come and do that. This is birdpixel, birdpixel.com, and seeingbirds.com, seeingbirds.com. So
John, I closed your screen share so everyone could see the watercolor. So if you're trying to reference that, you'll just have to click the button again.
Okay. Were people able to see the white colored pencil?
I don't think some people saw that, no.
I didn't put it on my demo because it's still damp. You don't want to put colored pencil on a damp page. Let's put the screen share up briefly again if we could. Oh, or do I have to do that from my end?
Yeah, you just have to click share screen again.
Okay, share screen. So here you'll see, so here's without, this is just watercolor on top of it. And then here's the big jump when you get the colored pencil. And then you can put more detail in on top of that. So just watercolor, oh, that's pretty cool. Watercolor and colored pencil, like it. All right. Then you can drop more detail on that, and then you're done. So here's your homework. Yes, you've got homework. I would like you to to go and draw 15 birds using photographic reference, using these techniques that you've just studied. And on some of those birds, really go down the rabbit hole of drawing and diagramming in the details that you see on the wing. Really go there. Overdo the wing on purpose. And then, on some of them, back off of that and just sort of and suggest the detail. Suggest the detail. So some really just like, I got this feather and this feather and this feather and this feather. Don't think of it as trying to make a pretty picture. Think of it as a study to try to understand. And on some of them, you're going to detail. And that's much more a close gift, a more close approach to what you'll be doing when you're sketching out in the field. Oh boy. So how do you, on a bird, how do you understand and map out all of these crazy patterns on the head? You look at heads of birds and there are distinct patterns. And especially when you're looking at, say, a sparrow or a number of warblers, there'll be these streaks and stripes, and you go like, wow, there's just like zebra stripes all over the head of that thing. How do you map those out, and how do you begin? Well, if you have the basic views, the basic zones which we talked about earlier, the eye ring, the ear patch, the malar, and the lores. Around those, you'll be able to map in most of the patterns on the face of the bird, because patterns, when a bird has patterns on its face, you will get stripes and you'll get patterns either by taking an entire zone, say here the entire ear patch and the eye ring. So this whole ear patch is dark. The feathers around the eye are light. Here the throat and the malar are light. So what I'm doing is I'm just turning on and off different zones. So if I memorize those zones on the face, that makes a great big difference. The only one that I'm going to add here is that sparrows, you will often see above all the features we've already put in. Imagine two stripes on the upper part of the head up here. So if there's two stripes, that means that there's a bonus stripe in the middle, because I've got two here. If I add those in, I'll be able to map out all the patterns that you're seeing on the heads of all the different types of sparrows. And so let's go there now. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk over the head. And before we were looking at feather groups. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be naming some of these zones, and we're going to be naming not the zones of feathers, but if I take the edges of two of those zones and put a dark pigment into it, you'll get these extra stripes around the edge. So for instance, well, let's just start in the middle of the head, and we're going to work our way down around this bird, and we'll sort of see what happens as we do. So start with, just make yourself a little diagram. If you haven't done so, we'll walk you through. Why don't I'll jump over to the document camera again, and I will we'll sort of show you here's what you're going to draw in. You have a bird. Its head is here, and it's going to be looking over in this direction. And here's its eye line. This side of the head is going to be more flat and squared off, and this side of the head is going to be more rounded. I'm going to put a little house shape with a little roof, straight walls, and a floor right over the crossbar where those two lines meet. And I'm going to have this bird looking out to a beak tip here. So from the top here, I'm going to come down to that. From the bottom, I'm going to come down to this corner here. The corner of my mouth is here, and I have just drawn here's my bird beak sticking out of my face. My eye, I'm going to give it some space here. So room for the lores. I'm going to put this in as a little oval. And this is the diagram on top of which I'm about to lay in not just the feather tracks, but the stripes. Let's just review those feather tracks. Let's start by putting a little ring lightly around the eye. Just very lightly put a ring around the eye. Go back from the eye, curve down along the side of the face, and then up to the corner of the mouth. That's your ear patch. Keep it light for this stuff. Go down from the corner of the mouth here to the bottom of the beak. And down like that. We'll put the parallel one on this side. Here is my lores. So I'm going to go from the eye over here, kind of to indicate some area there. I'm also going to put just a really faint little line kind of starting to go up the middle of the head there. That will help me kind of keep oriented. So if you have this diagram, we're about to get very interesting with that. So there is no photograph that we're working on right here. This is just, I'm constructing this little drawing from memory. Let's go back. Uh-oh. All right. Are you folks seeing my screen again, Hamar?
Yep.
Okay. So let's go back to this little diagram right here. And what I'm going to do is start to drop little features into it. The first is right up here in the middle of the forehead. I am going to add a stripe that goes right up the center of the head. That is my median crown stripe. Oh, by the way, if you look around, every field guide seems to have a different set of terms that they use for all these stripes on the head. The one that I like the best, and I recommend that people permanently adopt, is the system used by David Sibley. So he has a very intuitive, useful set of terms, and it makes a clear differentiation between the patches of feathers for instance, like the ear patch, versus what are the stripes that you get if you color in one of the edges of the patches. All the patterns on the heads are going to be taking a patch and turning that into one solid color, or putting color along the edges of that zone. So I really like David Sibley's system. I use his terms and his way of breaking it down. The best book for understanding that is David Sibley wrote a book called Birding Basics. I recommend that to everybody who's interested in drawing birds.
Do you want to take a little bit of time for Q&A? We have about 9 minutes left.
Oh, let me do 5 minutes on this bird head and then 4 minutes for Q&A. Ready? So here's our median crown stripe. Now, can you see the median crown stripe? Yay. All right, we're going up right there. Don't worry, all this is going to make sense in just a moment. Now, the next zone out from that is the lateral crown stripes. And those I'm going to, on my drawing, make dark on either side of that median crown stripe. And check out the lateral crown stripes. So these are the two black stripes on the head of the bird. Then I'm going to drop down to the next row here, and notice that it is two-toned. All right. So this area back here is referred to as the eyebrow. And the area in front of that is referred to as the supraloral, meaning above the laurel. If here are the lores, supraloral would be above the lores. So on my drawing, I have supraloral and laurel, and the eyebrow. So the area above the eyes that can connect into the supraloral, right? That's here. So eyebrow and supraloral. The lores are the area in front of the eye. And those can be dark, or those can be white. And if I take the top edge of the ear patch, here are my lores. And if I take the top edge of my ear patch and I make that dark, oh, actually, I'm not there yet. Kind of going from front to back, there's a special zone of feathers right around the eye, and that can be, you see those as little white dots in here, or a very nice eye ring here on this warbler. So here's my lores, here's my eye ring. And here is this, this stripe coming back from the edge of the eye. That's called an eye line. A good intuitive name. I can also make the bottom edge of the ear patch dark. See that little line coming down here? Here's my eye line. Here's a little line coming down. If I do that, Sibley calls this the mustache line, and I like that. It's easy to remember. So do you see the little mustache line? In front of that is the malar zone, M-A-L-A-R. And you see how even though this is a different color, I mean, it's the same color, you can still see the indication of that zone. So there's the malar that comes down in front of that. And if the front edge of the malar, nice malar here, if the front edge of the malar we darken it in, that is the lateral throat stripe. So you have lateral stripes here up on the crown and on the throat. So kind of boxes in lateral stripes here and lateral stripes here. And then nice lateral throat stripes here. There's the malar lateral throat stripes. And in between those is the throat. Right? So you see ear patch, malar, throat coming down. So take a look at the head of this bird and you'll see how this warbler is mapping those same zones. You see a hint of these lateral crown stripes coming up in here, right? The supraloral and the eyebrow here, yellow. We have the eye line and the lores. We have the mustache area right here in the throat. So you'll see these same patterns mapped on the heads of all of these different birds. So taking a little bit of time in learning that, you don't have to learn a different system for every bird. What you have to do is get the basic sense of these zones and how they look on the heads of some warblers and some sparrows, and then you'll have this system for mapping around the heads of the birds instead of going, oh, it's dark over there, it's light over there, what do I do with it? And it's not that everyone is different. They are so much the same. And that's pretty cool. All right, and now I have just a little bit of time, perhaps, for a couple of questions.
Okay, so we have about time for one very important question, and that is, what is your favorite bird?
Oh, so great question, and I love this because for me, I am very, very fickle, and what is my favorite bird changes from time to time, but it's interesting. There's been one bird that is consistently holding that spot for quite a while now, and that's the kingfisher. I love me. I'm going to move over to where I can plug in and not disappear. So I love kingfishers. Just that outrageous thing in the hair, that's so cool. And then like all the work that should have gone into making feet went into making the beak a little bit more outrageous. And if you go to Africa, there's this incredible radiation of kingfisher species, and some of them are they're hanging out in woodlands and going down and getting lizards and stuff. It's so cool. They're just a wonderful group. The belted kingfisher, I'm just crazy about that sound. Burrowing into banks. I mean, what's with that? And proportions, huge, huge head. So they're so much fun to draw. And you get to the spiky thing. I think that kingfishers are pretty cool. Yeah, that currently is big favorite.
That's awesome. Well, unfortunately, we're right about out of time. So thank you so much, John. And I'm sure everyone in the audience is saying thank you as well. We're going to have a class the same time next week on drawing water birds, correct?
That's right. So next week we'll be on drawing water birds, and we'll see if I can get my time management a little bit better. I was really proud of myself I'm not going to really go over and trying to, in the middle of my class, trim it down. But then didn't account for it. I just wasn't reading my clock correctly.
No worries.
Drawing is so much fun, and what a great time to get better at drawing birds. They will come to you. Get some bird seed. Order some bird seed if you can, and and we'll be able to see all these wonderful little beasties. Like, you don't have to go to the zoo. Wildness, crazy, real wildness will come to you. And that's why we love to watch birds. And that's also why we, as human beings, the most powerful and influential species on the planet, have a duty to protect and conserve them. And associations with like Audubon do a really wonderful job of that kind of stewardship of nature. So mad props to Audubon for not just your education work, but also your advocacy on the part of wild things in nature and your stewardship of birds.
And thank you very much for doing this. And if you in the audience want to support John or support Audubon, we've put donation links and links to John's book as well. And please share your homework with us on Facebook and Instagram using the hashtag Drawbirds2020. We'll see you next week.
Hey, thank you so much. I will see you all then. Those logistics, again, the two websites, Bird Pixel, maybe we can put it in the notes, and seeingbirds.com. You can download the worksheet and the little bird cutout if you would like. We are going to be back next week with more things. We're going to be looking at water birds, and we're also going to be looking at, on the day of the workshop after that, we'll be doing owls. If you are doing some drawings, I want to encourage people to share those online. When you do, let's use the hashtag, tag it with drawbirds2020, drawbirds2020. And what we'll do is we'll look for anything with that hashtag. We will assemble those and we'll share some of those with you, probably in an online format. It'd be really fun to see this. Another great resource for people is the Nature Journal Club, is a Facebook group where people are sharing tons of nature and bird related field sketch artwork. And it's a very inspiring place to go. And I want to encourage all of you people who are watching to check that out and share artwork there as well. If you go to my website, johnmuirlaws.com, you'll be able to find lots and lots of free resources on drawing birds, as well as other handouts and downloads and things that you can use to help you with your drawing and sketching. You can absolutely do this. You can absolutely do this. Drawing birds is not a gift. It's a skill that you're going to develop just by doing it on a regular basis. If you do it, it will come. I guarantee it, it will come. And you don't have to wait forever. It will come fast if you start putting in the time. Put in some time with this, and you're going to find that at start, you're looking at photographs and going like, oh, okay, is that the scapulars? And then because you're putting in that productive struggle in those training situations, you'll be able to go out in the field with your notebook and be able to draw what you see from live birds in the field. This isn't a fantasy. It will happen, but let's put in some work on this end while we're all kind of tucked away in our COVID shelters. Understand that structure of the birds, work on some of those drawings, the quick getting the gesture down. Don't skip that step. You will get this. You can do this. So I want to encourage everybody to stay safe, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week for part 2.